Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw. Are you a cat person or are you a dog person? For example, Fugazi, my cat, loves my podcast. Or my dog, Kafka, he also loves my podcast. They make sure to listen to every single episode. It doesn't matter if you're a cat person, a dog person, a snake person, a chicken person, or just a person. Give my show a listen, and if you like it, give me a thumbs up and share it, and help me grow it into something that can go big for everyone. And now, back to the podcast.
Well, I will ramble on with this question because I feel like it is something that has definitely evolved for me over the years. I am old enough that for the first half of my life, photography was not digital, but always connected to film. And as a kid, something being worthy of taking a picture, it was a big deal. Like if you were going to take a picture of something, it was something that was a big moment in your life that had to be memorialized. And with the advent of digital photography, I feel like all of our attitudes are very different now, because now if there's something you want to take a picture of, you don't really think about it that much. It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'll take a picture. And on one hand, that means that there are a lot of things that are important that maybe wouldn't have been recognized as important that now we are keeping. But on the other hand, sometimes I find what I do is take a lot of lousy pictures because I'm not like setting it up. I'm thinking, oh, well, I can fix it in editing. It'll be fine. And then I realize I've taken 30 pictures of the same thing and they're all terrible because I didn't put the effort in. So I think photography is a way of memorializing moments in our lives that we want to keep and we want to remember exactly as they are. But I think photographs lie.
Margaret, that was great. That was perfect. Thank you.
I rambled and then I got to a succinct point.
This is the formula of the podcast, right? Like people say to me, did you ask a question? I'm like, I don't know, but why don't you talk now? So it's okay. It's good. I think right. Because of who you are and how I have entered your world or how you've entered my consciousness, I think I'd like to invite. It's getting a little late here. It's about 9:30. It's past her bedtime, but I'm going to invite my daughter to come and maybe interview you.
Okay.
Okay, great. So, Cadence, why don't you come here? There's a bit of a lag. Okay, go on. So,
I'm sorry?
There's a bit of a lag.
Yes, there is just a little bit of a lag.
Okay, so, Cadence, Margaret, Cadence.
I can see.
Okay,
Hello.
Great.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi, Cadence. Very nice to meet you.
I read your books.
I am so glad to hear that. That is wonderful. And I understand I'm also keeping you up past your bedtime, which, are you one of those kids who likes to be kept up past your bedtime? Or are you somebody who likes to sleep?
I like both. I like sleeping,
okay.
But...
Okay.
I wouldn't have discovered your writing without Cadence's influence. And so, Cadence, why don't you, what was the first book of Margaret's that you had read?
The Missing Book 1, Found. I have it here. Me and you both read it together.
We both read it together.
So, yeah, basically, whenever I read it, I'd say what happened to him, and we just kind of reflect on it. So, that's basically how I got through the whole series.
So, would you have a question for Margaret now that you have a moment?
Yeah. Where do you get your inspiration for books?
Well, it comes from all over. With that particular book, it was a couple of different things. One of them was that I fell asleep on an airplane, and when I woke up, I had this total sense of disorientation that I didn't know where I was. I kind of didn't even know who I was. And it made me start thinking about, and I know you are someone who has traveled a lot, so you maybe have experienced this, that it's kind of incredible that we can get on a plane and be in a totally different part of the world in not really even that much time. And so, I kind of had this notion in my head about weird things that happen on airplanes. And I'm a little bit fascinated by that. And I just had this notion of a bunch of babies on an airplane and, where would they come from? Where would they be going? What would people do when they found them? And I just thought that was a really fun thing to play around with.
Yeah, I understand that. Like, sometimes I just get an idea, and then I write down something, like a Google note or something, and then I just don't stop until I've written, like, 5 chapters, and I'm like, wait, where did this start?
Good for you. Yeah, that is how I feel, too, that I get these ideas in my head, and I get obsessed.
So if you could give Cadence a bit of advice on what it's like to be an author, either ups and downs or in terms of the challenges, and because we see the result, we don't see the process.
Yeah, we don't see the writing process. Please explain.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like you've maybe seen the movie The Wizard of Oz. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, when I was little.
And there's that scene where Toto pulls back the curtain and, here's the great and powerful Oz. And then Toto pulls back the curtain and there's just some measly little man who's, not got that booming Oz voice. And then there's this pay no attention to the man behind the curtain that it's yeah, don't look at that. That's kind of what it's like to be a writer. Because it's to a certain extent, writing is an illusion that we are creating these worlds as writers. And I'm including you and me in that together because it sounds like you are very much a writer and that you have that impulse that you want to make these things up and then share it with other people. That's what you're doing when you're writing things down. And to a certain extent, when you are doing that, you're kind of hiding the fact, or I'm kind of hiding the fact when I'm writing that, yeah, when I wrote that particular scene, I had a really bad headache and, maybe I don't know. I'm trying to think when I was writing the Missing series, my kids were in middle school and the same age as the characters in the Missing series. And, maybe my son had said something surly to me as he was walking out the door because, that's kind of what middle school kids do. And, I'm kind of putting that to the side and then I'm creating something that pulls together things from real life, but also has this imagination to it. And it is isn't it fun to imagine this? And that's kind of what I'm doing as a writer. So there's kind of a tension now. A lot of writers feel compelled, as they're writing a book on, say, Twitter, to be saying, oh, I had a lousy writing day, or this manuscript's never going anywhere. And to a certain extent, I think that's really healthy for writers like you who are young to see that it's not just, we uncap our pens or, sit down at the typewriter and it just comes out and everything's easy and perfect the first time out. It's important, I think, for young writers to see that there's struggle there, but you don't necessarily want to know every detail about the background. Because I think you want to have that magic. You want to kind of feel the magic. And I will say there are moments when I'm writing when it does feel like magic, where it's just I have no idea where this idea comes from. It was just a gift that I got and I want to share with other people.
Yeah, cool.
You want to say one last thing or ask one last thing? Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say good luck with your writing. It's wonderful that you were writing a lot. So that was going to be my parting comment, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Bye.
Bye, sweetie. Good night.
Bye.
Don't forget to brush your teeth. Hi, nice to meet you. So nice. So how the podcast works is it's framed around the photographs. Right, so I asked you for four photos. You'll be amazed that an hour goes by super fast. Okay, are you ready?
Okay.
Oh, awesome. First of all, thank you so much. You're great. You're great. I can see on your face, like, you're bright and fun. Look at you. I love it. I love it. Okay, so the first photo that I'm looking at, wait, are you a kindred spirit? Are you a kindred spirit? What is this? Okay, so in the,
I let's hope so. Let's go with that. Yes.
I think so. Okay, so the first photo I'm looking at, it's magic. So it's a photo that seems to be in a gallery, and it's a sculpture. It's a photo of a sculpture. It's basically photographed straight on with overhead light. And the sculpture itself seems to be a collection or stack of 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say 15 drawers made out of wood with different colored finish on them. None of the drawers are open. They're all closed. And they're held together with what looks like to be a belt, I guess. So it's like if the belt or the lashing wasn't there, the drawers would just spill open or apart. Yeah. And it's an interesting sculpture. It's an interesting thing to send that as your first image. And in the background, I could just see a few sketches. It looks like a doorway into the rest of the gallery or something. I love that this is the photo. So what am I looking at? What is this?
So I love the way you're interpreting this photo, and a lot of your interpretations are very good. This is actually a picture from an art museum. It was the first time I stepped foot in an art museum since March 2020, when everything shut down.
Oh, wow, yeah.
In the United States. And I know you're in Hong Kong, and I know there were some differences about how everybody has experienced the pandemic.
Sure.
Basically, my life shut down March of 2020, and this picture was July of 2021 that my husband and, things were opening up again because we thought things were getting better.
Right.
And my husband had something in Indianapolis, which is about 3 hours away from where I live. And so we ended up going to this art museum, and it was, I love museums. I love art museums.
Sure.
It's always, I feel like if somebody is not feeling inspired for something to write, going to an art museum is a great thing to do.
For sure.
Because there are just so many things to jog, kind of the creativity there. It can always jog your memory. But I saw this particular, it's actually not a sculpture. It's actually supposedly a piece of furniture. Although not exactly a practical piece of furniture. It was in their kind of design area. And it is, as you kind of supposed, a bunch of drawers that are just held together by a belt.
Right.
And clearly, if you unbelted the belt, everything would fall, and it would, if there's stuff in the drawers, you don't know if there's stuff in the drawers or not, but if there's stuff in the drawers, it's just going to fall out.
Sure.
And but the belt's holding it all in place. And I looked at that, and I think the title of this particular piece of artwork, it has something to do with memory, or, like the cabinet of memory, something like that. But I looked at that and I'm like, that is exactly what it's like to write a book.
Okay.
That I am putting a bunch of drawers that maybe aren't even related to each other. And some of the drawers, like when I first start thinking about them, they're empty, or I haven't opened them. I think there's something in there, but I'm not really sure.
I love it.
And it's like, as a writer, what I'm doing is stretching the belt around all these different ideas and characters and possibilities, and I'm putting it all together.
Nice.
That I looked at that and I thought, that is what that's what my writing process is. Got it. That's it.
Amazing. Fantastic.
So it was so much fun to be at this art museum, and that kind of encapsulated that's kind of what I was thinking this summer.
Right.
I think.
Right. Okay. Look, since we've just met, and I've spent a long time. Okay, so my first degree was in creative writing, mostly looking at poetics and that kind of stuff. So I spend a lot of time thinking about writing, and professionally, writing is part of what I do, as is my own work. And so for me, it's like a real treat to speak to somebody who has a facility with the work of writing. So you you've gone through. I mean, the first book is always the first. I guess it's the first major hurdle, and then you realize, oh, wait a second, this is a doable process. But I'm also really fascinated because in talking to you and speaking with you, I'm trying to glean and to kind of hear your story and how your life evolved to have you become a committed, confirmed author who like, for whatever reason, you're writing for children, and I'm sure as your children get older, your audience gets older. So take us back to when you first began writing. Like, have you always been a writer? Have you always?
Sure.
So that's the kind of question that I ask.
Started with being a reader, which I think is the way. Yeah, I think that's how it starts for a lot of writers, so that's not unusual. I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and yeah, happy childhood, huge bookworm. Partly, I think, partly because my parents were huge readers, and my siblings were huge readers, and my grandparents were huge readers. I mean, it was what we did.
Yeah.
And but for me, also, it was a way to engage with the world. Because where I was growing up, for good and for bad, people were all pretty much, I won't say the same, but pretty homogeneous.
Right.
That pretty much everybody was white, pretty much everybody was Christian, pretty much all of my friends lived on farms too.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, that's a wonderful way to grow up.
For sure.
But I definitely felt a longing to know about the rest of the world. And to know about people in other places. And, you know, I was very curious about the other side of the planet. Are people the same as me? Are they different? You know, like, how are they different? How are they the same? Yeah, all those kind of things. And reading was a way to find that out. Travel later on became a way to find that out too. But the reading made me want to travel, and, you know, it opened the world for me. And very quickly as a kid, I started wanting to write as well, to kind of cast my stories out into the world as well. And so from a very young age, I was, you know, making up stories, and I was sometimes kind of lazy about writing them down, but I definitely would make up the stories. I would tell them to my younger brother and younger sister. And I felt like I was someone who wanted to become a writer. I didn't know anybody who was a writer, so I didn't know it was possible.
Oh, wow.
So I started out actually working as I got degrees in both creative writing and journalism, and then also history, just because I liked it. And I started out working as a newspaper reporter, and that kind of was the springboard into then writing fiction as well.
Yeah, like, in your growing up, was there a model? Like, for example, for Cadence, she sees me, she sees her mother. We're both, you know, we spent a long time around words and expression and that kind of stuff. So that's a model for her. But who was your model?
That is a good question. I did not really have a model of someone who was a writer, except the authors of the books that I loved.
Okay.
My parents, this is kind of ironic, they both hate to write and have always hated to write. That's like their least favorite thing to do. And so they were kind of puzzled that I had turned this love of reading into a love of wanting to write. I will say, though, my dad is very much a storyteller.
Right.
And he was always telling us stories like family history. He would read a book, and then he, like, at the dinner table, he'd be like, oh, and then this happened in this book, and I can't believe this. And so I was hearing a lot of, I would say, oral stories.
Sure.
And I also had a lot of teachers who were encouraging to me. So I would say they were models too, but I did not have a model of somebody being a writer except from the books that I read.
Right. So just to throw this out there as well, because from my own experience, when I talk to people and do consulting in strategic communications and business and all that stuff, and my client, who is such a successful business leader, I've very often used it, and I don't know if I've used this analogy because of my training in creative writing, but I've always said that we're like farmers in that we're always sowing seeds, little ideas, and we don't necessarily commit to the person following our ideas, but we put these seeds and ideas out in front of clients, in front of people, students, whatever, and sometimes the ground, their minds, their imagination is fertile, and something develops out of it, which it's a stretch. It's a total stretch. But I'm here to say that if you're such an accomplished author and you've done the work of writing, which is it's toil. It's tilling the land of your head. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you got it from a little bit from your parents, a little bit of something from farming, because that's how I kind of feel that author, like writing is to a certain extent. And I'm just imposing this, I'm projecting this on you with all due respect.
Well, I like that analogy. That's very good. I mean, because of the agricultural background, I do think of planting seeds.
Sure.
And it's funny because I have a joke with another writer who's a friend of mine, Lisa McMahon. We, for years, went out on book tour together, and I would say, Lisa, we're just planting seeds here.
For sure.
And so I love those analogies as well.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Okay. With your permission, would you like to say some more about the drawers, or would you like to move on to the next photograph?
Well, I guess I could say a little bit more, which is that the book that I was in the midst of revising this particular book, while I was, when I took time out and then went to the art museum, that particular book is about kids who discover letters that were written about 50 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And something happened between those two kids who wrote letters back and forth 50 years ago. And so the kids in the modern day are trying to figure out what's going on. And with that particular book specifically, it felt very much like I was trying to pull a lot of things together.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot about growing up in the 1970s versus what it's like growing up for kids now.
Oh, for sure.
There was a lot about cleaning out old things. So, yeah, that book is called The Secret Letters, and it will be coming out in fall of 2022.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this for me is meat and potatoes. This is like solid. I love talking about this stuff, and I'm really happy to have you on. Like, I really, really enjoy it. So before I think it's gonna be fighting tangents. Like, you're gonna go on a tangent. I'm gonna want to go on a different tangent, and we may never actually get to your photographs. So, shall we go to your next photo?
Sounds fair.
Okay. Okay, so it's a photograph of two people. It's a snapshot. It looks like it's in a classroom. Two people, you and another woman, are holding books, pointing at each other with the best expressions on your faces. And you have one of these faces that, like, your eyes are bonkers. Look at your eyes. You have the biggest smile. I love it. I don't know. Yeah, you're alive. You're definitely alive. But both in the photograph, you're both kind of looking at each other, having such a nice sort of expression. And what just happened that sparked that reaction in both of you?
So this was a picture. This picture was taken in January of 2020.
Okay.
And before the onset of the pandemic, up to that point, I was doing a lot of school visits, and we kind of mentioned earlier, I had mentioned something about my kids being in middle school. That was when I was writing the Missing series. Both of my kids are now in their 20s, grown up.
Wow.
They actually live on opposite coasts of the United States. One's in LA, one's in Boston area.
Wow.
So when they, now I have a lot more time to go out and do school visits, and this is kind of me being nostalgic for all the fun of just random things that would happen.
You're not wearing a mask.
It was such a treat. No, I'm not wearing a mask. And let me just say, this was before we understood. I mean, January 2020, kind of on the cusp there.
It's all good.
Yeah, but we were carefree. But this was just one of those random moments that occurred that wasn't planned. We hadn't designed this to happen, but it was actually in a school library, and I had just finished giving a presentation to a group of middle school kids, and this woman, the other woman who's in the picture with me, who is we're both really hamming things up. She was a teacher at this particular school, taught language arts. And she came up to me and was just like one of those teachers that you just know the kids love. Just full of enthusiasm, full of life, like so much energy. And she was telling me how much she enjoys having writers in the school to talk about writing and being enthusiastic with the kids. And then she was describing to me how she does a dance probably more than once a year, but she has this dance that she does teaching the kids how to write. That there's here's the introductory paragraph dance. Okay. Here's the body of the essay dance. I mean, just really, you could tell she was a great teacher. And then she said, and this is my writers are wonderful dance. and so I said, well, then this is my teachers are wonderful dance, because teachers, none of us could do what we do without teachers showing us how to do it. And so we were just being totally goofy, but totally sincere at the same time.
Absolutely.
Because she was genuinely saying writers are wonderful, and I was genuinely saying, teachers are amazing. And we were just having so much fun. Yeah. I mean, that was just it was one of those moments. It was just joy filled.
I love it. No, so that's the core of the podcast is, we have one life and how do we make the most of it, right? And in your configuration of your mind and your experience and your expression and the stuff of writing is interesting, of being an author is interesting in the sense that you go into a room, close the door. You have your little ritual. You have however you write, be it on a machine or with a pen or however it is, and then you just sit there and you see what comes up and you capture it and you share it, and you have this, especially in your case, you're kind of writing for an audience that you're accommodating or you're projecting into, you're trying to understand, to sort of say, okay, what can I say in a way that really resonates with this mind that has reached a certain level of maturity? And then you kind of apply the brakes at some points, I'm assuming, or do you just go on intuition? Then you have this teacher who's hamming it up and who clearly has a theatrical way of communicating that obviously, for the camera. So you're both in a way, you're both kindred spirits as well. And what do you have to say about that connection in which on the teacher side, she has to take material that's already presented or prepared and then make it alive for a student or for a younger mind. And then on the other side, you're somebody who sits in a room and maybe you just picture your children and you're just talking to them. So how do you connect what I've just said to your own experience and how you see the world?
I think all of what you said is true. I could just say, you're right.
no, it's not about me.
Just go from there.
Yeah, go from there.
I would say, kind of as a writer, there is that tension there. I think most writers think of themselves as introverts. I have met some who are very much extroverts, who would be just as happy to perform everything they do rather than, write. I think most writers are I want my little quiet room, and I want to shut the world out and just tell my story and have fun with it and enjoy it. And then there is kind of that tension of almost that fear of, then, do I want to share this with other people? What are they going to think about it? What will they say about it? Will it mean anything to them? I think that's the thing that most of us feel most insecure about, that if we're writing something and we're writing our heart and soul and getting it out there, and then nobody cares or nobody gets it, that's pretty brutal. So writing is really frightening. And I guess that's one of the reasons I picked this picture, that it is one of those moments of celebrating that it is possible for us to connect as people. Mm-hmm. I think at heart of everything is that writing is communicating. We are connecting the innermost parts of ourselves with hopefully the innermost parts of other people.
Right. Okay, so what city are you in right now? Like, where are you right at this moment?
Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. And if you want further detail, I am sitting in my son's old bedroom that my husband, like at the beginning of the pandemic, my husband jokingly started referring to as my TV studio, because I started doing, a lot of virtual school visits and library visits and all that kind of thing.
Of course.
So I'm looking around, and although we've cleaned it out some, I'm seeing his childhood bookcase and like his soccer trophies from when he was a kid.
Yeah. No, so what did your kids think of you? For example, at what point did the threshold happen when they said, "Hey, wait a second, this stuff that they like, you're their mother, you're their mom." So they're like, they see you do the work, they see you do the revisions, they see you go through the process, and sometimes editing can be a real many steps back. So it can be. And because you're working on it with an editor to make it commercially successful, sometimes there's that back and forth. It's like I describe it as being like basically like making a new baby, because but sometimes by the time it gets out, you're just like, I don't even see it anymore. Although parents don't say that about their children.
Hopefully not.
No, hopefully not. But when your children would made that connection of, hey, wait a second, my mom, who sits in a desk, who writes out these books, her books are in the library. And what was your experience to see that, and to how do you experience that?
Well, it depended on the ages that they were. When they were in elementary school, it was definitely something that made them very happy.
Okay.
And they were very proud of me. I can remember when my son was in first grade, and all the fifth graders at their school were reading one of my books, Among the Hidden.
Wow.
And they knew that, that there were kids, that the author of that book, the kids went to their school. So it got to the point that, my son would be walking down the hall, and fifth graders would be like giving him high fives and saying, "Hey, that's Connor Haddix. That's Margaret Peterson Haddix's son." And when you're a first grader and the fifth graders know who you are, that is really cool.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I mean, at that age, my kids were milking it, I have to say. And I hope not in an obnoxious way. We had some conversations about that. I think they were okay. By middle school, it was totally embarrassing.
Oh, really?
Because, in middle school, I know your daughter's younger,
sure.
And maybe she won't do this. Maybe it will be, maybe you'll skip this unpleasantness of this phase. But in middle school, you want to be your own person. You kind of want to pretend you don't have parents at all.
Mm.
And so it is really embarrassing that other people, A, know who your mother is, and B, think she's cool.
Sure.
that during there was kind of a phase in middle school that my daughter actually, like, I would have their teachers inviting me to come in to speak.
Right.
And my daughter said to me, "Mom, as long as I'm in middle school, please do not come in and talk about your writing."
That's awesome.
And I said, okay. I mean, that's fair, because they needed to develop their own personality, and they needed to be themselves, and they needed to be someone besides the daughter of, or the son of.
Sure.
So we had that deal. And then kind of even into high school, like early high school, my daughter was wearing she was wearing a sweatshirt that I think was, maybe she was playing volleyball at that point. And so it said Haddix on the back. And some upperclassman said, hey, there's an author with that name. And she's like, yeah, I know. And like, didn't even say, yeah, that's my mom. Just was like, yeah, whatever.
Oh, dude. Hopefully
and then, I mean, now they're grown up now. They've become who they are. They're fine with it.
Oh, great. Well, let's take that as the natural segue to the next photograph. Is that okay for you?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so what I do is, in my own spare time and everything, I sit, like when people say, oh, what does your dad do for a living? Now she's older, so she can explain it better, but she always says, oh, he sits with old men and talks. That's what it looks like to her. And in my case, it's about delving into like these deep ideas of human advancement. So it's very big, it's very conceptual. It's like, how do we articulate program of human advancement itself? And I see it very clearly that the work that you do is within that realm, right? Because you could look at like an engineer or a scientist or whatever who does like the sort of the intense high competencies work, very technical, all that stuff, and yet they would completely fail to communicate to somebody who's 12 years old and to maintain some kind of continuity of research or whatever. And yet it's incredible that within you, your life kind of evolved into a way that you sat down and you thought, okay, well, I'm going to convert themes and ideas and situations and environments into ways that a 10 or 12-year-old will read it and it will completely engross them and make sense to them. And so that talent is really unique because like, have you taught before? Have you, other than being a parent and well, being a journalist, but how have you made that bridge?
Wow, that's a deep question. I think, well, there are several things that I could respond to in that, but I think as far as making the bridge to being able to talk to kids who are 10 or 12 or, that's kind of I've written books for kind of a variety of kids' ages from about 6 up to 15, 16, 17, that kind of range. But I think the important thing is to connect to to remember and connect to how it felt myself to be those ages. That I am thinking about it that way. And
that's astounding.
As long as I can remember that and kind of remember a lot of the emotions of it, I think that is as important as anything else at writing for that age group. Because when I forget that, or when I am relating to kids as a parent, or I've taught as well, or as a teacher, like the adult talking down to kids, I kind of think that's when you lose them.
Sure, for sure.
Because there's a different way of seeing kids when you're in charge of, making sure that they do their homework, or, you need to, well, like you reminded your daughter to brush her teeth before she went to bed, which, you have to do that as a parent, but that's a different side of the brain than, oh yeah, I remember what it's like to be like, well, really, what will happen if I go to bed just this once without brushing my teeth?
Sure.
And then, maybe you do it and you're like, ew, my teeth feel terrible. Oh, I guess I do need to brush my teeth every night. Kind of that kind of thing, that it's a different thought process.
Right. No, for sure. And I
don't know if that answers your question. I went for the gross, disgusting, unbrushed teeth.
It was
description,
perfect.
so you can tell that I'm a kid's writer. I went for that.
Perfect. It couldn't be more perfect. like I said, like this is going to be a whole like competing tangents because I wanted to go into a totally different direction, but then I actually brought up the photograph. I'm like, oh, I should probably describe the photo. So in this photograph, so you're standing with three girls. It looks like a classroom setting. You have name tags on your lapels. You're standing in front of a desk. There's a pen. There are a couple of books, hardcover, hardbound that look brand new. It says "Children of Exile," and they're really nice. It's a nice portrait. So what is the situation? And it looks like it's a book signing event. Take it away. What am I looking at?
So yes, you were looking at, well, that was during or right at the time of a book signing. This was an event in Central Ohio, not very far from where I live. There's this. I'll get my plug in for. There's a wonderful institution here called the Thurber House, which there was I don't know that you would be familiar with James Thurber, but he is probably the most famous writer to come out of Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
And so his house, and from where he lived like roughly 100 years ago, has turned into a writer's center.
Oh, wow.
And they do all sorts of wonderful things that are supportive to writers and literature. And, it's a wonderful organization. This particular event, someone that I know, who's a friend of mine, had started this program called the Story Box, where professional writers, all of us wrote like the first page of something that could be turned into a story.
Okay.
And then a bunch of those first pages were put into a box, sent around to different schools, kind of all over the place. And then kids were handed these basically story starters.
Yeah.
And then they got to finish the story.
Oh, that's great.
And I found it tremendously fun to be able to do this because I think it's so much easier to write the beginning of a story than to then do the hard work to finish it. So, I was like, sure, I can write a page here, go have fun with it, kids. And so this was an event. It was kind of celebrating this Storybox program. And the three girls who were standing with me, they were assigned to me to be kind of my assistants during the book signing. And also, I think they introduced me. They were assigned to me.
Sure.
And they were writers themselves. They had all participated in their program. They were all girls who wanted to be writers and were very very talented for their age, very much more so than I was at their ages. And one of the things that I really loved about that, they were just random. Well, not randomly. I don't know if maybe they requested me or what, but it was kind of random that I got those particular three kids. I hadn't selected them or anything, but I thought it was really interesting that one girl was white, one girl was Asian American, and one girl was African American and also wearing a hijab in this picture. We're all wearing black and white. And then the girl with the hijab has on a red, it's red. So it's kind of a splash of color in the midst of things. And I thought, when the picture was taken, I thought, we're so balanced. And I think for a lot of people, the first thing you would notice is, the racial differences there.
Sure.
But, and that may be like somebody looking at that picture that you did not point this out, which you live in a very diverse city, I think. And so maybe that wasn't what sprung to mind first. But I think a lot of people looking at that picture would first notice the differences between us. I just thought it was interesting, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying, that as a kid, I was growing up in an area where pretty much everybody was white, and for me to get a sense of, okay, there's a lot more diversity out there in the world, I got that through books, and then it's kind of funny, this is here in Central Ohio, this is a half an hour from where I live, and these are all people who live in Central Ohio. All of that was very close by.
Right.
And I didn't necessarily see it as a kid.
Right.
And so that's one thing that I got from that. But the other thing is, a lot of people would look at this picture and say, those three girls are very different just because, you look at a picture and
Sure.
you see skin color.
Sure.
But all of us were writers.
Yep.
And you could also say I'm a lot older than these girls, but all of us were writers. All of us had that same passion.
Sure.
Obviously I was the person who's the published writer. They haven't yet reached that, but they may very well at some point, may very well surpass anything I've done. I don't know. I like this picture because it's, in one sense, everybody's the same. And that's not necessarily what people would say when they see this picture.
Right.
That I definitely felt a connection to these girls as we're all writers.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things I'll let you in on is in my 20s, I was run over by a car and I had very intense brain trauma. And cognitively, so I was in a coma and I was paralyzed, but cognitively I was reduced to that of like a 5 or 10-year-old. The thing is, I was aware that, like, for example, I was having a hard time reading, I was having a hard time speaking, and although I was aware of how easy things were, I just didn't have the mental capacity to do simple math or to read. And then that gave me a very visceral experience with this feeling that, we're born, we grow up, we mature, we get older, and then we die. But like that, our timeline is a kind of it's just that we fall at different states on our timelines. And so right now in this photograph, you're with these three girls who are younger than you, who don't have the experience and the exposure and the maturity and everything, but in a way, what separates you isn't competence of writing, but in a way, it's that shared essence. For example, of I'm going to create narrative with whatever capacity of language that I have. Right. So yeah, you've trained as a writer, and your skill is far beyond where theirs is, but they're just along a different part in their journey. And it's an amazing, like if we deconstruct the image like that, it's quite fascinating that we're essentially looking at four beings who are on different, call it a ladder of writing or a journey of writing. But yeah, no, I love it. I could talk about this stuff all the time. I love it. So that's not a question.
See, now I'm like, okay, as a journalist, I would ask all these questions about that car accident and what it was like, and then what, kind of, was it a gradual process coming out of it, or was there just like one day that you're like, oh, I'm better now?
Oh,
and,
darling, no.
I totally disrail this whole conversation.
No, but it's good because I think what it is, though, is it's also like how one moment we have our lives. Like, we just met accidentally because my daughter, hungry for a book, found the fruit of your labor and really connected with it. That talent that you had to create a story that would capture her imagination. So I'm very thankful because it was either that or reading physics textbooks. So so thank you for giving us by the bottom of her heart. Thank you. So let's move on to the next photo.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, so in this photograph, you're sitting at a table. It's a red covered table. Maybe it was the same day of the previous photograph. So, but behind you is like some black paneling, and there are all these book covers, and they're all graced with your name, and it's got to be. You must have such starstruck children come up to you and say, like, are you real? Like, describe this photograph. Like, how does this resonate with your audience?
So this photograph, it was at a book signing. I was speaking at a school in Mississippi. I had to think about where that was. And the school had set up, it's like a cloth background, and I think it was either a teacher or a librarian, had gone to the effort of like photocopying the covers of most, if not all of my books, and then putting them up on this, the black cloth behind me.
It's amazing.
I mean, I was there at the school for about maybe an hour and a half.
Wow.
I mean, they went to a lot of effort, which, I mean, I cannot say enough about amazing teachers and librarians, and they are incredible, and they don't get enough credit. But anyhow, the school had done this to have a backdrop for me to do after I'd given a speech. Then I was signing books for kids as they came up. And I love that because then I have a little bit of chance to talk to the kids.
Sure.
And sometimes sometimes they want to be writers and we get to talk about that. Sometimes they have something a question they want to ask or something they want to say privately about the book, something that was meaningful to them. That's all wonderful. But the thing that I love about this particular picture, which was taken by someone from the bookstore in Jackson, Mississippi, Lemuria. The thing that I love about it is because there's that black backdrop and then, the covers of the books, I feel like it almost looks like that's my thought cloud.
Okay.
That, like I've got all these books circling my head. And that's what it feels like to be a writer.
Right.
That there are all these, like ideas in the air above me and usually people don't see it.
Yeah.
But, like all these things that I'm thinking about that it's fun to be able to share that with other people. But it felt like that was just such a great manifestation of what it feels like to be a writer. But the other thing about this picture, and this ties into what I said at the beginning when you asked me to say what I thought about photography, and I said sometimes pictures lie.
Okay.
This picture is kind of a lie because as you were describing it, I mean, it's true. It really happened. It is a representation of that moment, but it's also a lie. And, something can be a truth and a lie at the same time in some ways, but that was in September, and I had a really bad summer. One of the things that had happened that summer leading into that event was that I had broken my left wrist, and all these people said to me, "Oh, it's so great that you broke your left wrist because then you can still use your dominant hand."
You're
and I'm
left-handed.
Like, no, I'm left-handed. I broke my dominant wrist.
Yeah.
And so I had broken my wrist and had to have a metal plate put in my wrist to put it back together. And had gone through, it sounds like you've had a much greater medical ordeal in terms of getting back to normal after having some catastrophic problem. And the broken wrist was not catastrophic, but I was also in the midst of switching publishers and I was really agonizing about all of that. And so then my wrist was broken. This was the first event that I was doing where I was doing a book signing. And so basically the doctor had said to me, you need to wear, like I was still wearing like a splint on my hand and on my arm. He's like, you need to do that almost 24/7, but if you feel like you can take it off to write, you can't really do it while writing my name. He said, you are well enough that you can take it off and you should be able to write. And so it was like kind of this, like for the very first time again, I can sign my name. And
you're beaming.
So it looks like this like glorious moment, which in one way it was, but in another moment, like I look at that and I remember there was a lot of pain. There was a lot of physical therapy to get my wrist back into shape. And I think I'll tie this to writing, that I think we are increasingly moving toward being more of a visual society, that people share pictures on Instagram and you react to the picture. You don't necessarily react to the story behind it.
Sure.
We look at video to say, oh, that's what's going on. And I'm not criticizing either of those things necessarily, but you don't know what's going on inside people's heads and hearts.
Sure.
Just looking at a picture.
Yep.
Or just looking at video. And that's what I think writing and books are important for, that we can share what's on our insides.
Yep.
And I mean, I love the format of your podcast that you're taking pictures that people could just look at, and then you're asking for the story behind it.
Sure.
And that's kind of what writing in general is, that we're saying, okay, here's this thing, and I'm going to give you a 200-page novel to explain what's behind it.
Absolutely. Okay. My daughter is going to absolutely love the fact that you're left-handed, because she's left-handed. So she's going to be like, oh, that's fun. Okay, so she...
Good for her.
I love that here's this photograph with these, as you say, like a thought cloud around you of these hovering book covers. And every book is in and of itself, I mean, even though if it's part of a series is fine, but as a writer, you're trying to do is you're creating this narrative that is complete in and of itself. What I love about this photo is that for somebody who's looking at what is the process of writing a book or a novel, and then watching, like, here, like, you look so approachable, you look so human, you look so normal, you look so nice, so perfect. Would you like to share one more bit of insight that looking back you can use to inspire other people, either young writers or even mature people who have never written a book, who are like in their 40s or 50s or 60s, who want to, give it a try? What would you say?
Sure. There are many things I could say. I'll start with the people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, as the first thing, just because that's right there. I know that there's kind of I'll even go younger, 20s and 30s too, because I think there's almost a sense among a lot of younger people and people 50s, 60s, 70s, that there's like this moment in time that if you don't succeed at that point, you're never going to succeed at writing. That there are a lot of people who come out of university programs and maybe they've gotten a creative writing degree and they think, if I don't make it in the first year or two, that's it, I'm not a writer. Or there are people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, who are like, well, I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't do it. And so forget it. It's not ever going to happen. That is one of the great things about writing, that you can do it at any age. And it's not like, say, being a gymnast where you do miss, you're just not capable of doing that after a certain age. That writing, in some ways, hopefully the older we all get, the wiser we all get. I'm not sure that always works that way, but that would be kind of the goal, that sometimes you need to grow into being a writer, and it's okay to not have that happen until later. For younger people who want to write, I would say, I feel like we have done this thing to kids where we have made them think often that if they are not instantly good at something, they're not ever going to be good at it. That
right.
We put a lot of pressure on kids nowadays. And
okay.
I would like to see kids be able to explore a lot of different things and have fun with a lot of different things, and even like do things that you're bad at.
Sure.
And just have fun with it. And it's okay to be bad at something. Just, don't expect to have everybody say that's the greatest thing ever when it's not, but explore. Being a kid is a good time to explore.
Yeah.
And to just have fun with things.
Yeah.
And I would just love to see kids doing that a lot.
For sure. Margaret, look, I know we were plagued a little bit by some technical difficulties. We are separated by a very large distance.
Exactly. And it is actually a miracle that technology works as well as it does.
It's amazing. Yeah, I really appreciate you meeting with me, and I really hope that it like with these podcasts, it's very hard. It's like with a book. You create it, and you hope that it will resonate, and you hope that it'll be successful, you seem to have figured out how to make really readable books. They're fantastic. And who knows, maybe the podcast one day will become something that people will enjoy. But I definitely hope that even one kid who listens to this, who goes, oh, like it's demystified, will think, well, yeah, I'm going to go down that road.
Yeah.
So that's not a question. That's just me saying thank you.
That's yeah. Well, thank you. Enjoyed talking with you and your daughter. Please tell her that I really hope that she continues to enjoy both reading and writing, and I look forward to hearing what all she does.
For sure. That. Well, Margaret, thank you so much. Best of health to you and to everyone in your life.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.